Greetings friends! You are on the channel Military Reporter, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of March 4, 2025. We are moving to the line of contact, where the Russian Federation continues its offensive. Let's start with the Sudzhan protrusion. Today, objective control footage has emerged confirming the presence of Russian Federation troops on the territory of the village of Zuravka. We have just watched a video of a Ukrainian drone striking a Russian soldier. Based on this footage, there has been a small advance on the northern part of Zuravka, and this is already the territory of Sumy region, in favor of the Russian Federation. Also, information from various cartographers about control over the Novinkoy settlement continues to come in. Russian units advanced towards Sumy a few days ago. So far, there is no further development of the situation. Perhaps the troops have consolidated and are waiting for more favorable weather conditions to advance. It is still impossible to move through the fields, but perhaps this is not necessary. Today, without exception, everyone confirms that the Ukrainian side is losing at least 33% of the equipment moving along Route 07 due to Russian drone strikes. The logistics and supply of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Sudzha area is disrupted, and Ukrainian troops are suffering huge losses. This region has already become subsidized. If hostilities continue in the current format, in a year's time all Ukrainian equipment on this section of the front can be destroyed on this road of death alone. Even if the Russian Federation will not advance, and the Ukrainian side will continue to try to hold this area at any cost. We are now moving north, towards Malaya Lakhnya. The assault operations are continuing here, with Russian units gradually advancing from the direction of Orlovka, Novaya Sorakino and Staraya Sorakino. Today, objective control footage was published, on which Russian soldiers managed to raise the flag in the northern part of the village of Novaya Sorakino. Let me remind you that, according to the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as various cartographers and experts, Novaya Sorakino has been completely taken over by the Russian army. Currently, the fighting is already taking place on the territory of Malaya Lakhnya. Next we move to the southern part of the Sudzhan ledge, where there are two important points. Let's start with the Gavo-Gorno line. This is the second supply line, which is still used by the AFU to maintain the combat capability of the group on the territory of Sudzha and the Sudzhan protrusion. However, this road is already under full fire control. The footage shows two AFU vehicles moving towards Sudzha, but being ambushed or hit by artillery. As a result, one of the vehicles was hit, the second one was unable to continue moving. Thus, all roads in the area are under tight fire control. The Russian army continues to advance gradually. But the most interesting footage comes from the direction of the village of Makhnovka. Let's see, we see a small island of resistance, or something else, it's hard to say. Today, Ukrainian sources associated with the 78th Independent Airborne Assault Regiment published footage of objective control of FPV drone strikes on the Russian army's forward positions in Makhnovka. The footage shows a Ukrainian drone attacking Russian soldiers who are trying to take cover. The footage is fresh, published today. The only question that arises when viewing them is, how did the Russian soldiers end up in this part of Makhnovka? Perhaps this is the result of the breakthrough that Ukrainian sources wrote about yesterday, saying that there was a critical situation in the Sudzhan direction. They promised that geolocations confirming the advance of Russian troops would soon appear. This may be the case, but it is still unclear how exactly the Russian units managed to go so deep into Makhnovka. Perhaps additional details will emerge in the near future. If this footage is not archival, the situation for the Ukrainian armed forces units on this section of the front is becoming as difficult as possible. Now we are moving towards Kupiansk. The main fighting today took place in its northeastern part. Some cartographers note that the Ukrainian armed forces conducted a series of counterattacks, trying to regain control over some positions along the railroad. Their objective is to wedge themselves between the settlements of Sinkovka, Kalinovo and the Oskol River, moving northward as deeply as possible. Ukrainian formations are conducting these counterattacks to try to cut off Russian units on the Ukrainian side of the Oskol River from supplies. If the Ukrainian army manages to carry out these strikes successfully, the Russian Federation grouping in the Dvoreknaya area could find itself partially without logistics or even cut off from the main forces. Apparently, this is exactly the kind of operation that Ukrainian units are now trying to carry out. Next we move on to the central Kupiansk direction, where we are receiving information that over the past 24 hours the Russian army has managed to significantly expand its zone of control in the vicinity of the village of Zagryzovo. In fact, this settlement has already finally passed into the gray zone. It is possible that the map will be finally updated in the near future. Russian soldiers are also advancing near the village of Boguslavka. And in the area of the village of Nadia, the map has undergone significant changes. According to pro-Ukrainian mapping services, the Russian army is gradually and carefully advancing towards the village of Chern. Then we move to the southern direction. In the area of the village of Novolubretskoy, the Russian side is actively working with aircraft and artillery. The temporary deployment points of the Ukrainian armed forces are being destroyed, and the temporary positions of FPV drone operators are being identified. In general, the situation is similar to other parts of the front. The bridgehead is gradually being prepared for a new assault, which will probably be carried out in the near future by units of the South Group of Forces. Let me remind you that a few weeks ago Valery Gerasimov came to the area of responsibility of this group, probably to coordinate further actions. We are now moving towards Chaz Yar and Toretsk. There are no serious changes here, but there has been a slight adjustment of positions near Toretsk. In this footage, you can see Russian soldiers mopping up the central part of the city. Let me remind you that a few days ago the Ukrainian side managed to carry out a successful counterattack, as a result of which most of the northern part of Toretsk came back under the control of the AFU. The footage shows the clearing of one of the buildings. The next direction is Pokrovsk. Here pro-Ukrainian sources report that the village of Peskanoy has finally come under the control of Russian units. The AFU continue to control the situation along the railroad and possibly on the outskirts. With the restoration of control over Peskanoy, logistics with the settlements of Kotlino and Yudaknoy have improved, which is likely to create conditions for further offensive actions in the near future. The Russian side is now actively striking mines located to the north and northwest, which may indicate plans to move in that direction. Now moving towards Pokrovsk. In the South Donbass section, the Russian army is actively working in the area of the village of Kamar. At the moment, Kamar is a kind of logistical hub through which resources and supplies for AFU units are distributed. From here, the troops can move either towards Velika Novosayolka or towards Konstantinovka and Bogodar. Russian artillery and airstrikes are regularly carried out on this town. Since the beginning of January, a significant number of incoming FAB bombs have been recorded here, destroying much of the infrastructure. The supply of the AFU grouping along the Mokry Yili River passes through Kamar, towards Skudnoy, and further north towards Veseloy and Fedorivka. As for the Shevchenko direction, the map has changed over the past 24 hours. According to various sources, from March 2nd to March 3rd, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to significantly expand the zone of control in the locality of Privolnoy. The objective control footage confirms the presence of Russian soldiers on the territory of this settlement. Some cartographers also note the advance of the Russian army north of Berlitskoy. This indicates that every day new geolocation data is received, confirming the intentions of the Russian army to continue the offensive. In the Zaporizhia direction, footage from the areas of Guliapoli and Orkhov settlements is increasingly being published. Here, Russian units have become more active, striking at the enemy's temporary deployment points. At the moment, the greatest amount of footage is coming from this section of the front. All this information indicates that in the near future, perhaps after the end of the thaw and stabilization of the soil, the Russian army will go on the offensive either in the Orkhov or Guliapol direction. That's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, give us your likes, and have a good day.